Masato Shindo is just your average guy, working a soul-crushing corporate job that never seems to end. The workload is insane, and he can't even take unpaid leave. The company promises easygoing bosses, but it's all a trap to pull employees into long, stressful hours. Day and night, Shindo is working, barely getting any sleep. He takes the job because it's the only offer he has at the time, and slowly, he gets used to the grind. But the more he pushes himself, the more he loses sight of why he's even doing this. Sleep becomes a distant memory. Every time he tries to rest, there's always one more task waiting for him. The only thing keeping him going is his plants. He develops a habit of tending to a small garden at home. It starts one evening when he gets home from work and watches a TV show about farmers. They live simple lives, just planting, growing, and harvesting. No stress, no deadlines, just peace. That's when he decides to start his own little garden, hoping it will give him a small escape from the madness of his job. 2 days ago, one of his tomatoes was just about to ripen. He has been watching it closely, waiting for it to turn red. When he finally picks it up, though, something feels off. The tomato looks strange. He hasn't seen one like it before and starts to worry that it might be diseased. Thinking it might infect the other plants, he eats it himself without really thinking about it. As soon as he swallows, he feels something is wrong. His vision blurs, and he collapses on the floor, regretting his decision. He curses himself for eating it so carelessly. His body goes numb, and his mind starts to fade. When he wakes up, he is in the middle of a forest. Confused, he looks around, wondering why he isn't in a hospital or back home. Then, a strange window appears in front of him, showing stats like in a video game. He sees his occupation listed as farmer and tries to make sense of it all. He remembers being a corporate slave, so seeing farmer doesn't really add up. Then it hits him. It's because of the tomato. That weird fruit must have done something. The reincarnation fruit skill on his status window seems to confirm it. At first, he thinks maybe he's hallucinating from eating the strange tomato, so he does the first thing that comes to mind. He slams his head against a tree to see if it's real. The pain that follows tells him it definitely isn't an illusion. He hits the tree a few more times just to be sure, and finally accepts that this is his new reality. Now he's a farmer in a completely different world. He doesn't know what to do next, but one thing is clear: this is no dream. Suddenly, a dryad appears in front of Shindo, nearly giving him a heart attack. Apparently, the smell of the reincarnation tree is attracting them. The dryads quickly warm up to him, and just like that, they become his tamed creatures. He hears a voice in his head explaining the whole thing, and somehow, he's tamed them without even trying. Shindo is still trying to process what's happening. He notices that he feels strangely refreshed, and when he checks his stats, they've skyrocketed, 5 times higher than before. It's unreal. His body feels stronger, faster, and overall, just better. One of the dryads calls him the reincarnation tree, which catches him off guard. He quickly corrects her, saying he isn't the tree, just a guy who ate a weird fruit that smelled like one. But the dryads aren't interested in the details. They just keep greeting him, one after another, becoming his tamed creatures. Before long, he has 122 dryads under his control, and his stats are through the roof. It's so high, they can't even be calculated anymore. Shindo spends the next hour trying to figure out just how much stronger he's become, but the numbers are so ridiculous that he gives up. It doesn't really matter. His stats are insane, and he hasn't even lifted a finger. Realizing his situation, Shindo decides he needs to find some people. Maybe then things will start to make sense. For now, he's going to treat all of this like an illusion, play along, and see where it leads him. As he fiddles with his stats, he stumbles across a new ability, flight. But Shindo is no fool. With his stats this high, flying might mean shooting straight into space, and there's no way he wants to end up floating around in the void. He wishes for a safer way to fly when suddenly, a large shadow falls over him. Shindo looks up, but it's too late. A massive creature attacks him from behind, hitting him hard. Or at least it should have. He barely feels it. When he turns to face the creature, he sees a dragon, fierce and powerful, but its claws are chipped from the impact. He's stunned. Not only has the dragon's attack failed to hurt him, but the beast has actually hurt itself instead. That's when Shindo gets an idea. Maybe he can ride the dragon and have it fly him to a place with people. But first, he needs to figure out how to negotiate with the thing. The problem is that the dragon doesn't seem interested in talking. It's already charging up for another attack, and this time, it looks like it means business. Shindo has to act fast. He scrolls through his skills and finds one called Spell Break. It seems better than throwing up a barrier. As the dragon unleashes its breath attack, Shindo casts the spell, cutting off the dragon's breath mid-attack. The dragon freezes, shocked that its attack has been stopped so easily. The dryad speaks up, translating the dragon's reaction. It's in complete disbelief. Shindo is surprised to hear that the dryad can actually understand the dragon, and he asks her to help him communicate. The dryad activates some kind of automatic translation skill, and suddenly, Shindo can understand the dragon's words as if he has spoken its language all along. He asks the dragon if it can hear him, startling the beast even more. Now that they can talk, Shindo decides to make his request. He asks the dragon if it can take him flying through the sky. He isn't great at negotiating, so he goes straight for it, hoping for the best. The dragon, however, isn't impressed. It sneers at Shindo, telling him it won't grant a human's request just because he can speak the language of a noble creature like a dragon. Shindo's polite request seems to anger the dragon even more, and it begins charging another attack. Without hesitation, Shindo uses Spellbreak again and calmly tells the dragon that if it's really such a noble creature, it should help those in trouble. The dragon clearly doesn't like humans and sees them as weak and beneath her. Realizing that talking isn't getting him anywhere, Shindo knows it's time to stop playing nice. If this dragon isn't going to listen, he'll just have to make it listen. He scrolls through his skills again, ready to use something a little more persuasive. Shindo considers using force, but for 2 reasons. He hesitates. First, he sees it as self-defense, given the dragon's aggression. Second, he can't afford to let the dragon fly off without helping him. As he scrolls through his skills, he comes across various fire abilities, ranging from nanofire to terrafire. He figures if he uses something too powerful, he might accidentally roast the dragon or burn down the entire forest, so he decides to start with the weakest spell. He casts nanofire, and to his surprise, a massive volcanic eruption of flames shoots into the sky. It's far stronger than he expected, and the dragon is just as shocked. The beast roars in disbelief, calling the attack the legendary Last Atomic Inferno. Confused, Shindo tries to explain that he only used nanofire, but the dragon doesn't believe him. There's no way such a small spell could produce so much power, and the fact that he doesn't need to chant makes it even more terrifying. Shindo is equally puzzled. He has no idea about advanced magic, but then it hits him. The dragon is terrified of the Last Atomic Inferno. Maybe he can use that fear to his advantage. The dragon, still in awe, declares that if someone can unleash that kind of power with just nanofire, the world would be in serious danger. Suddenly, the dragon's attitude shifts, and it becomes overly polite, retracting all its previous insults. Realizing he has the upper hand, Shindo decides not to push the dragon too far. He just needs its help to fly. He asks the dragon if she can take him to a town, and the dragon, now eager to please, agrees without hesitation. Shindo warns her not to overexert herself, but the dragon scoffs, claiming she can fly across an entire continent in half a day without breaking a sweat. Relieved, Shindo climbs onto the dragon's back. As they take off, the speed startles him, and he grabs one of her scales too tightly, causing it to come off. He loses his balance and tumbles from the dragon's back, screaming as he plummets toward the ground. Fortunately, his boosted stats save him from any harm, and he lands without a scratch. The dragon quickly returns, apologizing profusely for the scale falling off. Shindo reassures her that it's fine and asks her not to bow her head too much, fearing it will shake off the dryads clinging to him. As compensation, the dragon gives him the scale that has fallen, explaining that dragon scales are highly valuable in the human world. Shindo stores it in his inventory, where it's labeled as a scale from the divine crimson dragon. He climbs back onto the dragon's back, and they take off once again, soaring high above the landscape. From up here, the world below looks like a patchwork of tiny farms, and Shindo finally feels a sense of peace. This world might be the fresh start he has longed for. As they fly, a town comes into view. Shindo asks the dragon to hover above it for a moment before landing outside the town gates. He thanks her for her help, and the dragon smiles, saying it has been her pleasure. Just as he is about to say goodbye, one of the dryads mentions that they can stay with the dragon, allowing Shindo to keep in contact with her whenever he needs. Grateful, Shindo bids farewell to the dragon, who promises to come whenever he calls. Once the dragon flies off, Shindo heads toward the town gates. The dragon reaches her home in a flash, landing gracefully. The dryad assigned to her asks if this place is where she lives, to which the dragon nods, confirming it. But there's something else on her mind, something she's been curious to try after observing Shindo earlier. She tells the dryad to watch closely. With a powerful flap of her wings, she lifts off and flies a short distance before landing softly on the ground. Suddenly, scales fade away, and her shape shrinks until, standing in the place of the dragon, is a beautiful young woman with 2 horns crowning her head. She turns to the dryad, a small smile on her lips, and asks how she did with her human transformation magic. Meanwhile, the guards are clearly shaken, talking about the dragon they've seen earlier, certain they were moments away from death. Shindo approaches them quietly and asks if he can enter the town. The guards ask to see his family crest, mistaking him for a noble due to his polite speech. Caught off guard, Shindo mutters that he doesn't have one, which makes the guards even more suspicious. They explain that his manner of speaking is far too refined for a commoner, and that's why they assume he is nobility. Realizing this misunderstanding is caused by the automatic language translation, Shindo intentionally speaks in a rougher tone, surprising the guards with his sudden shift in speech. He casually mentions that the dragon wasn't a big deal, and brags about how he scared it off using nanofire. The guards are stunned. Someone who can make a dragon act as his personal transportation is beyond anything they've ever seen. It is hard for Shindo to believe that a dragon could be scared off by something as small as a nanoflame. But from the way the guards react, it seems like a big deal around here. He doesn't think much of it and asks them how he can enter the town. The guards hand him a ring, explaining that it is a magical tracking tool. He needs to wear it until he gets his ID made at the guild, after which he can remove it. They say it is necessary to maintain public order. Shindo isn't surprised. The ring works similarly to a GPS from his old world. He thanks them but has one last question. He asks if there is anything strange sitting on his head or floating around him. They just stare at him, confused, and say they don't see anything, which is the answer he needs to feel good about moving on. With that, Shindo enters the town. The first stop is the guild. He needs to figure out how things work here, and the guards mentioned it would help him get an idea of what is going on. After asking around for directions, he finally finds it, but to his surprise, it isn't an adventurer's guild like he expected. It is an agricultural guild. He can't help but see the irony. Of all the places he could have ended up, this one is perfect. Agriculture is exactly what he is into. As he steps inside, a guild employee greets him and asks what he needs. He tells her he is here to get his ID made. She nods and asks if he'd be okay using an agricultural guild membership card as his ID. Honestly, it sounds like a great fit for him, so he agrees. She hands him a form, and after filling out the details, his guild card is ready. She asks him which of his names is his first, between Masato and Shindo. Once he tells her, she immediately starts calling him by his first name, which throws him off a little. He isn't used to people here being so informal, but he lets it slide. After that, she mentions the registration fee of 1,000 ether. He pays the fee, and she finally removes the tracking ring. Feeling a bit more relaxed, Shindo asks her if he can sell a dragon scale. Her eyes widen, and she asks what someone like him is doing with a dragon scale in a place like this. Still, she answers his question and says he can sell it here at the guild. Before doing that, Shindo asks about the average living expenses. The employee, who introduces herself as Carol, tells him that the cost for one person is about 30,000 ether per month. Shindo figures the money from selling the scale will be more than enough to cover his living expenses. But Carol explains that the value of the dragon scale depends on how much dragonium is in it, so she'll need to measure it before giving him a final price. Just as Shindo is getting ready to move on with his plans, the guild's appraiser shows up. The moment the guy lays eyes on the dragon scale Shindo brings in, his face lights up in shock. He can't believe what he's seeing. The scale has the highest concentration of dragonium he's ever come across. Apparently, the rank of a dragon is determined by how much dragonium it contains, and from the amount in this scale, the appraiser concludes it has to be from an ancient dragon. Hearing that, Shindo finally realizes that the flaming crimson dragon he encountered must have been one of those ancient ones. But he still isn't convinced. He asks the appraiser if this amount of dragonium is considered small, since to him, it doesn't seem like much. The appraiser quickly sets him straight, along with the employee who is helping out. They both explain that it's actually the opposite. The scale is incredibly valuable. In fact, the price for it is going to be around 8.1 million ether. Shindo's jaw nearly drops, but he keeps his cool and asks about the registration fee. Then he mentions that he wants to buy some farmland. The employee tells him buying farmland is no easy task. It's expensive, and he wouldn't be able to do it all at once. She suggests he start by renting a plot, which makes sense to him. Renting would give him the chance to try things out on a larger scale without breaking the bank. He decides to rent about 1 hectare of land. The next step is to choose the location. The employee hands him some catalogs with recommendations based on seasons. Shindo flips through them and eventually settles on tomatoes and soybeans, something he had grown once back in elementary school. He tells the employee, Carol, about his choice, and she informs him that the total cost will be 220,000 ether. She also warns him that managing a farm on his own might be tough without help, but he reassures her he has some connections and tells her not to worry. Once the basics are sorted, like renting an apartment to stay in, Shindo looks out of his window, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. He is one step closer to the peaceful life he has always dreamed of. The next morning, Shindo goes to the farm he has rented. It's far from town, making it the perfect place to call the dragon without attracting attention. Soon enough, the dragon arrives, but it's invisible. Shindo uses his enhanced vision to see it, along with the dryad that comes with it. The dragon seems impressed and notes how Shindo activates its invisibility using the dryad, allowing it to appear without anyone noticing. Shindo feels relieved that the plan works and asks if he can ride on the dragon's back again. Once on, he uses his illumination skill to map out his farmland. With everything set, he asks the dragon to mix the soil with the special material he requested. The dragon quickly uses its storage magic to pull out what Shindo needs. This special material turns out to be wood ash, which he requires to adjust the soil's acidity. It's made by burning grass from the remote grasslands. The dryad checks the soil and confirms it's now in perfect condition. She also casually mentions that the special thing the dragon brought includes its own dung. Shindo freezes for a second, realizing he's just asked the dragon to spread its dung all over his farm. But according to the dryad, it's excellent for the crops, so he decides to just go with it. The next step is making furrows in the field, and the dragon offers to help. It asks Shindo if the furrows are like waves in a human field, and even though Shindo is skeptical at first, those massive claws don't seem like they'd be much help. He's pleasantly surprised when the dragon gets to work. Despite its size, it carves out precise, clean furrows with ease. Shindo can't help but feel grateful that he's met the dragon after arriving in this world. With a smile, he turns to the dragon and asks if it wants to join him for breakfast. The dragon approaches Shindo, stating they haven't introduced themselves yet. Apparently, the dragon doesn't like being referred to simply as dragon or by its species name. Shindo casually mentions that he already knows her name is the Flaming Crimson Dragon, a detail he figured out when he stored her scales earlier. The dragon admits it's her name but finds it kind of embarrassing to be called that. She then asks him to give her a proper name. Shindo can't help but think it's a strange introduction if he's the one who has to come up with the name. He starts brainstorming, and as a joke, he thinks of calling her Doryman, because she reminds him of the character from his previous world. But before he can say it out loud, the dragon reveals something surprising. She's female. That catches him off guard, and he shifts his thinking. After going through a bunch of names in his head, he finally settles on Himari. The name makes Shindo feel oddly satisfied, and when he tells her, the dragon smiles. She seems genuinely happy with the choice, even though it sounds uncommon in these lands. She then asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Masato Shindo. Himari agrees to call him by his name from now on, and it's strange for both of them, considering she had once tried to kill him. But today they're sowing seeds together, side by side. Shindo remembers he has an infinite number of skills at his disposal, so he decides to casually toss the seeds around to get the job done. As soon as he throws them, the seeds land perfectly spaced in neat rows across the field. Himari watches in awe, noticing how unnatural his technique is. Not only are the seeds perfectly divided, but they're also already planted deep into the soil. She asks him how he has such a mysterious skill, and Shindo feels a bit guilty for having it so easy. He brushes it off, saying the only thing left now is watering the fields. Before they can start, the dryads appear, offering to handle the watering for him. Shindo agrees, curious to see how they'll do it. One of the dryads moves a bit farther away, and suddenly a cloud starts forming above them. It looks exactly like a real rain cloud, and soon enough, it starts pouring rain over the fields. Shindo uses his appraisal skill and finds out that this cloud is something special, a mysterious cloud created by dryads, known to be incredibly beneficial for crops. With the dryads' help, all the fieldwork is done in no time. Shindo thanks Himari and the dryads for their help, telling her she can head home now. Himari reassures him that if he ever needs anything, he can call on her again. Once she leaves, Shindo reflects on how smoothly everything went. There's nothing left to do now except wait for the crops to grow and be ready for harvest. For the first time, he feels like his life is moving at a comfortable pace. Farming is progressing nicely, and he's genuinely happy about it. But there's one thing bothering him: the lack of Japanese food in this world. He's been craving it for a while now, and it's driving him crazy. Unfortunately, this world doesn't have soy sauce, vinegar, miso, mirin, or even rice. Grocery stores here don't carry any of it. He figures that if he wants to eat Japanese food, he'll have to make the ingredients himself. The real challenge, though, is whether he can create something Japanese with what's available. Then he remembers something that might be worth trying. The next day, Shindo finds himself hunting boars and gathering vegetables in the mountains. Himari had suggested this place when he asked for a good spot to hunt and collect ingredients. Himari tells Shindo that this mountain is good enough and the wild boars they might run into won't be a big deal. Shindo, on the other hand, is only here for one reason: to make savory egg custard. He figures he doesn't need to worry about eggs since he can buy those from the store. What he needs are mountain vegetables and mushrooms, but since he doesn't know much about this world, he asks Himari to help him find them. Himari asks if they could use the boar as an ingredient too. Just as Shindo turns to reply, he spots something behind her on a tree. Japanese herbs and oyster mushrooms, exactly what he's looking for. He feels pretty good about finding them so easily. It's a solid start. Then Himari says she's found some tasty mushrooms too, but when she shows them to him, he freezes for a second. Fly agaric. The mushroom is beautiful, but it's packed with toxic substances. Shindo sighs, realizing these probably won't be much help since they're poisonous. Himari, though, isn't worried at all. She confidently tells him that someone with his vitality could handle them just fine, and besides, they taste amazing. Shindo takes a closer look and realizes she's right. The mushroom is known for having an intense umami flavor, thanks to the ibotenic acid, which is way stronger than your typical umami taste. Apparently, some people even risk their lives to taste these mushrooms, not caring about the poison. Shindo feels tempted. Against his better judgment, he decides to add the fly agaric mushrooms to the recipe. Before he can second-guess himself, one of the dryads appears, offering him another ingredient. It turns out to be a shirasu, which is basically a lemon in this world. Shindo thinks it'll add the perfect refreshing aroma to his dish. With all these ingredients in hand, he tells Himari it's time to head back. She asks if he's really going to cook with all these strange ingredients, and Shindo nods. She seems excited to try it. Once they're back in town, though, he makes a rookie mistake. He forgets to hide Himari with invisibility magic. The guards at the gate panic at the sight of her and bolt. Shindo quickly fixes the situation, then gets ready to start cooking. He begins by prepping the ingredients for his favorite dish, chawanmushi, or savory egg custard. He beats the eggs and uses his advanced alchemy skill to create the perfect seasoning with ease, mixing it into water to cook the wild boar meat. The goal is to keep the texture smooth, so he carefully pops any air bubbles with a spoon. Next, he places the meat and mushrooms into the chawan, a small Japanese cup, and pours the egg mixture on top. Instead of using a steamer, he sets the cups into a frying pan filled with water. Using his magic to control the heat, he cooks them for about 10 minutes. Once done, he takes the cups out and finishes the dish by placing a slice of citrus on the edge for that fresh aroma. Finally, the chawanmushi is complete. Shindo invites Himari to try the dish. She arrives quickly, eager to taste it. He wonders aloud how she's going to manage eating from the tiny human-sized cups, considering her size as a dragon. Himari grins and tells him to wait. Flying a little closer to the balcony, she suddenly transforms in mid-air into her human form. Shindo's jaw drops. He had no idea she could do that. Himari, clearly proud of herself, smirks and asks how she looks. Shindo is still in shock, but sets aside the surprise, realizing the more important thing, they can now enjoy their meal together. They sit down at the table, the dish served and ready. Before they begin, they exchange a quick, traditional Japanese-style greeting. Himari, excited, quickly grabs her cup, eager to eat right away. But Shindo stops her, calmly instructing her to squeeze the lemon over the dish first and then eat it with a spoon. She listens and follows his instructions, and when they finally taste the dish, it turns out to be even more delicious than either of them expected. The crunchiness of the herbs perfectly complements the smooth, tender texture of the oyster mushrooms. Himari exclaims how smooth and flavorful it is, exactly what Shindo was hoping for. After that, Shindo hesitates for a moment but decides to try the fly agaric mushroom. He's unsure at first but takes a bite. The taste is like nothing he's ever experienced before. The umami hits him hard, better than anything he's tasted in his previous life, and for a moment, he understands how people could get addicted to these dangerous mushrooms. Luckily, his detox skill kicks in, letting him savor the flavor without any harm. Shindo notices that Himari doesn't seem to need any detox at all. She's enjoying the mushroom just fine, with no side effects whatsoever. They finish their meal together, happily savoring every bite. Himari thanks him for making such an incredible dish, telling him he clearly knows his way around exquisite flavors. Shindo, pleased, asks her if she'd like to try more dishes later on. She quickly agrees, even requesting that he make this one again so she can store it using her magic. He promises to prepare it for her next time. And with that, she heads home. After she leaves, Shindo thinks about how much more enjoyable the food in this world could be. The next day, with his free time on hand, something he never had in his old life as a corporate slave, he decides to explore the gardening supply store. He walks through the aisles, looking at various items like bamboo stakes, which are way too expensive for him. He calculates the cost and realizes that outfitting a 1-hectare farm would be a huge expense. He wonders if he could make the stakes himself to save money. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out his name. It's Carol from the Agricultural Guild. Shindo immediately thanks her for the help she'd given him before, but Carol waves it off, saying she was just doing her job. She explains that she's here to shop for her own home garden, something she takes care of whenever she's on break from the guild. She offers to show him around the store, giving him a head start on what to buy. Shindo asks if she's sure, and Carol assures him it's no problem at all. As they walk, she introduces him to a bunch of items, some of which leave Shindo amazed. He learns about the seed invasion barrier, which repels unwanted plants like weeds, and the sprinkler magic tool, a handy device for watering large areas. Shindo listens, but he quickly realizes he doesn't need most of these tools. Dryad's blessings have already made his farming life much easier. He tells Carol he won't need the items she just explained because he has the ability to control rain clouds. Carol goes silent for a moment, clearly amazed, and Shindo feels a little awkward, realizing how strange that must sound to her. After all, she can't see the dryads that help him. He goes on to explain that watering the field isn't a problem for him, and once again, Carol looks surprised, though she seems to be getting used to his strange abilities. Shindo's eyes land on a bottle of liquid fertilizer, and he can't help but wonder what something like that is doing in this world. It doesn't make sense that there's no industrial development here. He did not understand how anyone could have created something so advanced. Carol quickly clears it up for him, explaining that the liquid fertilizer wasn't made here at all. It dropped from the dungeons. Shindo's a bit shocked, realizing there are dungeons in this world too. Apparently they drop all kinds of items, even farming tools. Carol goes on to tell him about growth enhancers that speed up crop growth. 1 can of the stuff could make an acre of crops grow 5 days faster. He feels a bit disappointed hearing that something like this exists. Instant crops kind of take the magic out of farming, but then he asks her about the price. Turns out, each can of the growth booster costs 5,000 ether. Only the wealthy farmers can afford it and turn a profit, she says. But then she mentions that with something like a dragon scale in his possession, Shindo could just go and collect these items from the dungeon himself. That's when it clicks. He actually could do that. He knows he can handle the upper floors of the dungeon well enough, and the thought of gathering items like the growth boosters on his own suddenly seems very possible. He decides to give it a try. After heading into the dungeon and taking down a few monsters on the lower floors though, his drops are almost non-existent. Frustrated, Shindo decides to switch up his strategy and focus more on physical attacks, using his strengthening magic. He wonders how deep he'll have to go to get his hands on those growth enhancers. That's when Himari calls out to him, asking why he dragged her along to this dungeon. She thought he could handle it on his own. Shindo tells her that it'd be helpful to have her around, especially to deal with the enemies and guide him through anything strange they might encounter. In simpler terms, he admits, she's like a walking reference guide to him. Himari feels a little let down by that. She wanted to be seen as more, but he reassures her that he really does find her helpful. Then he asks if there are any powerful monsters they should be avoiding. Himari reminds him that she's a dragon. Most monsters are terrified of her, and even the stronger ones here won't dare challenge them. With that, Shindo feels confident they can dive deeper into the dungeon without worrying too much. He opens his skill window, thinking of trying something new. The skill asks him to imagine what kind of structure he wants to create, and an idea pops into his head: an elevator. As soon as he thinks about it, the skill activates. The ground starts shaking, and before he knows it, a rift opens in the dungeon wall. From deep within the earth, an elevator emerges with its gates wide open. Shindo stares, amazed by the sight. The craftsmanship is unreal, far beyond anything that should exist in this world, where the concept of an elevator doesn't even exist. Himari's shocked too, asking how he could just change the structure of the dungeon like that, as if he's some kind of demon king. They step into the elevator, and it smoothly carries them down several floors, eventually stopping at the 80th. The doors slide open, and they're immediately met by a massive, hulking monster. Without missing a beat, Shindo asks Himari if this creature is stronger than her. She casually assures him it's not, but warns him to be careful. This bear-like beast may not be stronger, but it's quick on its feet, and its reflexes are sharp. They need to be cautious with how they approach the fight. Shindo nods, already charging ahead, determined to take it down. Before she even realizes it, Shindo moves in for the kill, taking down the monster with a single, devastating kick. It's over in 1 second. The monster drops an item as it crumbles to the ground, and that's when she notices the beast is already dead, taken out by Shindo. Confused, she asks him if the monster somehow took itself out because she didn't even see him move. Shindo casually tells her that he just exploited the monster's weak points. He then shows her a card that dropped from the monster. It's the Wyvern Circulation card, which can summon multiple wyverns that have storage capacity for transport. Wyverns are monsters that are 50 times faster than any carriage, making this card a big deal. He asks her if every bear drops different cards. She explains that the same monsters always drop the same cards. So, if he isn't finding what he wants, he should switch to a different monster. He takes that in and looks ahead, spotting a passing crocodile. He points it out and asks if that one would work. Before she can respond, she realizes he's already gone. She sighs as she notices the crocodile is dead too. He took it down before she could even see what happened. Once again, he's way too fast for her to keep up. The monster drops another item. This time it's the ultimate vinyl house, a structure that creates the perfect environment for growing any plant, except fungi. Shindo seems pretty pleased with it, imagining all the plants he could grow now. Himari suddenly remembers something and asks if the vinyl house could cultivate alhildake. Shindo looks confused and asks if it's some kind of mushroom, wanting to know more. Himari explains that alhildake are the raw materials needed to cure white mage's disease, one of the 5 deadliest diseases in the world. White mages can only be cured with a specific medicine, and her mother happens to have the disease. She only has 300 years left to live, and Himari had almost given up hope of curing her. But if the vinyl house could grow alhildake, her mother's life might be saved. Shindo doesn't hesitate. He promises her that he'll grow the mushrooms as fast as possible. But he also mentions they'll need a growth accelerator and some alhildake spores to get started. Himari tells him that spores are everywhere, it's just that cultivating them is incredibly difficult. Shindo nods, thinking the properties sound like botulinum bacteria, but he brushes that thought aside for now. They continue exploring the dungeon, and soon enough they come across a mimic treasure chest. It's not much of a challenge for Shindo, though. He easily cuts through it, and the chest drops a dubbing card. This card can replicate any item obtained in the dungeon, which could come in handy later. After dealing with the last of the monsters on the floor, Himari lets Shindo know they've cleared everything out. But still no sign of the growth accelerator. Shindo figures they have no choice but to go deeper into the dungeon. The place is dangerous, but they're running out of options. So, they head for the elevator. They arrive at the 81st floor, and the monsters here are even stronger than before. After a tough fight, Shindo finally manages to get his hands on the item he's been searching for, a growth accelerator. He can hardly believe it. This thing can boost crop growth by 3 whole months, which is way better than anything he's seen in the stores. With this, he can harvest all his crops at once. Just as Shindo is about to take a breather, Himari spots something on the wall. It's a glass lizard. She explains its abilities. It can expand its body and scatter explosive glass fragments with a single move. Dangerous stuff. Shindo knows they need to be careful. He starts thinking about setting up a trap, just in case his sword can't cut through the creature. Before they can prepare, the glass lizard attacks. Shindo has no choice but to go in with his sword. With one powerful strike, he shatters the lizard's glass body. It's a tough fight, but somehow he manages. Himari isn't surprised. She always knew Shindo was absurdly strong, even if he doesn't see it himself. The glass lizard drops an item, a pair of glass shoes called Cinderella Clinic. The shoes are supposed to turn anyone who wears them into a beautiful woman for life, even if it's a man. Shindo takes one look and knows it's completely useless for him, but he decides to hold on to it for appraisal later. After the fight, Himari asks if he plans to explore more of the dungeon. Shindo shrugs it off. He was never really that serious about being an adventurer. They part ways, and Himari heads home, telling him to call her if he ever uses the vinyl house card. Shindo heads back to town instead. Before going to his fields, he decides to stop by the Adventurers Guild to sell the glass shoes. The appraisal girl greets him, recognizing him as the guy who brought in the dragon scales the other day. She's not surprised he's got something new and incredible. She half-jokingly mentions that it wouldn't shock her if it were some legendary item this time around. When she finishes the appraisal, she's shocked. Turns out the glass shoes are a top-tier version of the legendary momentary glitter of Cinderella. This thing can influence relationships among high nobles and royalty. She asks where he found something this rare, and when Shindo says it's from the 81st floor of the dungeon, she doesn't believe him at first. But after using a lie detector on him, she realizes he's telling the truth. Just as Shindo is wrapping things up at the guild, the master appraiser steps out from the back, looking intrigued. He must have overheard something about the 81st floor, because he heads straight for Shindo and asks if he's really the one who brought back items from the deepest parts of the dungeon. Apparently, they had already received a report about it. The guy also asks Shindo if he knows anything about the strange structure that recently appeared in the dungeon. Shindo casually tells him he must be talking about the elevator he built, since moving between floors was getting annoying. The appraisers are left completely speechless. What sounds like a simple thing at first is actually outrageous. Shindo built a freaking elevator in the dungeon. Shindo, a bit confused by their reaction, asks if they don't like it. He's even ready to delete it if it's that big of a deal. But the master appraiser quickly waves him off and says no. They want the elevator to stay open to the public. He offers Shindo a deal, 3 million ether per year as a license fee for the elevator. Shindo agrees, as long as the money is enough, and casually mentions that they can handle the payment through the agricultural guild. With that settled, Shindo walks out of the guild, feeling pretty good about his now significantly larger funds. On his way back, he checks his status and realizes that even though he's just living an ordinary life, his stats are skyrocketing. He figures he doesn't need to worry about running out of magical power anytime soon, so he decides to use magic to get to the fields faster. When he arrives, he starts wondering how to spread the growth-promoting agent across the field. Luckily, one of the dryads reminds him to mix it properly into the watering clouds they make. Shindo agrees and fills the clouds with the agent, almost like fueling up a tank. Soon, the clouds rain down on the fields, and the effect is immediate. The plants start growing at an insane speed, like he's watching them on fast forward. But then he notices that some of the plants are bending over, which could damage the crops. Thinking quickly, he uses gravity manipulation to give them support until they can grow on their own. Within minutes, the seeds he sowed have turned into fully grown crops. His tomatoes and soybeans are ready for harvest, bright, ripe, and practically glowing under the sun. Shindo decides to only harvest half of them for now and announces to the dryads that it's time to get to work. The dryads, excited, jump into action, helping with the harvest right away. After a long day of working together, they're almost done. Before wrapping up, Shindo asks them to use the sticks he gave them to support each plant individually. The dryads nod, saying they can handle it and get right to work, carefully providing support to all the plants. Shindo remembers that the growth-promoting agent he used has a cooldown of 4 days, so he suggests they take it easy and rest until it's ready to use again. 4 days later, they finish harvesting all the remaining tomatoes and soybeans. He carefully collects everything and stores the harvest away. When he gets back home, he checks his inventory and is blown away by what he sees. 20 tons of tomatoes, 892 kilos of edamame, and 984 kilos of soybeans. Curious about his crops, Shindo uses his appraisal skill. What he finds shocks him. The tomatoes he grew are called everlasting tomatoes. They're packed with the ultimate anti-aging ingredient and have the highest quality taste imaginable. The beans are divine eye black beans, full of vision-enhancing nutrients. Shindo stares at the screen, struggling to believe what is happening with his crops. After a moment of disbelief, he tries one of the tomatoes. He can't stop eating it. The flavor is so good that he's tempted to keep them all to himself, but he eventually puts the tomatoes back in storage to keep them fresh. He starts thinking about selling most of them, and decides it's time to visit the Agricultural Guild warehouse. When he arrives, Carol, the guild receptionist, is floored by the sheer amount of tomatoes and beans he brought. She can't believe her eyes. She asks if he's really just a beginner, because no one gets this kind of harvest in only 2 weeks. Shindo, with a sheepish smile, tells her that half of his success is thanks to her. He mentions that the growth accelerator she told him about in the dungeon sped up the growth of his crops by 3 months. Carol freezes. She had only ever heard of it increasing growth by 3 minutes, not months. Her brain can't process what she's hearing. She stares at Shindo, completely dumbfounded, but tries to act like she didn't hear anything too crazy. For now, she offers to help him sort out the harvest. Using her telekinesis, Carol organizes the tomatoes and beans, checking their quality along the way. Every single one is perfect. No diseases, no imperfections. It's a flawless harvest, something most farmers couldn't dream of achieving so easily. Shindo then asks her something that's been on his mind. He wants to know if it's normal for there to be crops like tomatoes that grant eternal youth and black beans that improve eyesight. He wonders if fruits like these are commonly sold in the market. Carol, realizing the significance of his question, pieces everything together. And then, without warning, she collapses from the sheer shock of it all. Shindo panics, rushing over to catch her before she hits the ground. He calls out to her, trying to help her back to her feet. Carol stumbles to her feet, still dizzy from everything that just happened. She decides to call an appraiser to check the strange crops Shindo had harvested. The appraiser takes one look at her and suggests calling a doctor instead, but Carol waves it off and rushes out anyway. A few minutes later, she returns with an old man by her side. He's the appraiser she went to find. The moment he sees the vegetables laid out in front of him, his eyes widen. He mentions they look like the legendary vegetables from ancient tales, but to be sure, he gets closer to inspect them. After using his appraisal skill, his expression is priceless. He's absolutely stunned by what he's seeing. Without hesitation, the old man grabs Shindo by the shoulders, asking how in the world he managed to grow crops like this. Shindo, completely confused, just tells him the truth. He used the ordinary seeds Carol gave him. Carol nods, confirming that she sold him regular seeds. There was nothing special about them. The old man can't believe it. If that's true, then the only explanation is that the legendary fairy, the Dryad, must have lent her powers to these crops. At this point, The dryad, who's been hanging around this whole time, feels a bit awkward hearing herself being talked about like some mythical creature. Shindo grins and casually says maybe the dryad helped him out on a whim, but Carol isn't buying it. She quickly shoots down the idea, reminding him that dryads are just fairy tales. They've never been seen by humans, so it's ridiculous to think they'd ally with one. Meanwhile, the dryad is quietly enjoying being treated as a legendary being. For Shindo, though, things are starting to make sense. That rain the dryad created must have had some magical effect on his crops. It boosted them, turning them into something extraordinary. The tomatoes and soybeans are packed with more nutrients and vitamins than usual, and the rain supercharged their juiciness. Carol, now fully convinced that these crops are special, tells Shindo they'll need the help of an exclusive merchant to sell them. Shindo, a little clueless, asks what that even means. Carol explains that an exclusive merchant deals with products of higher quality, the kind you don't just toss into the regular market. These crops are too valuable to be sold normally, especially since they have properties like extending lifespans that could attract a lot of unwanted attention. She goes on to say that selling items like this isn't just about profit. It's about protecting the source and the producer. If people find out Shindo is the one growing these crops, they'll come after him. So, by working with an exclusive merchant, they can keep his identity hidden while making sure the crops are sold through safe, separate channels. The merchant handles everything, no matter how far they have to go, to keep Shindo protected from any dangerous individuals who might want a piece of what he's got. Shindo figures his status might be ordinary enough to avoid trouble, but just to be safe, he asks the dryad to keep an eye out for anything suspicious around his lodging. The dryad agrees and assures him that he can leave that to her. Meanwhile, the appraiser decides to take the information to the guildmaster so they can arrange for someone trustworthy to help out. After a bit of waiting, the guildmaster sends an exclusive merchant named Cole, and it turns out Carol already knows him. She says Cole is the perfect fit for what they need. When Cole introduces himself, he mentions his skill, mystification, and tells Shindo he can trust him. Carol backs him up, explaining that his ability lets him turn into mist and move around like air, which makes him incredibly useful. Cole also shares a bit of his backstory. Apparently, he has a younger sister with special abilities, which led a criminal organization to target her. To keep her safe, Cole hid her away, but in exchange, he was captured and tortured by the group. Despite the pain, Cole never revealed any information. Over time, he awakened his mystification ability, which let him escape and sound the alarm at the base. Shindo thinks the story is pretty intense and wants to help out however he can, so he decides to give Cole one of the items he picked up from the dungeon earlier. He tells Cole that it's great to meet him and hands over a card as a gesture of friendship, which could help with transportation. When Cole sees the card, his eyes widen in shock. It's a wyvern circulation card, a relic from ancient civilizations, and one of only 5 ever known to exist. Apparently this card is insanely valuable, usually reserved for emergencies at the national level. Shindo has no idea about any of this, and Carol laughs, telling him that people would end up in history books if they used something like that so casually. After that, Shindo and Cole finalize a contract and start preparing whatever Cole might need. They also decide to leave one of the dryads to assist Cole. As part of the deal, the profit distribution is set at 20% for Cole, 5% for the guild, and the rest for Shindo. He thinks the margin for Cole is a bit high but reasonable, given the risks involved. Once the business is sorted, Shindo asks Carol if she could sell him some wheat seeds. She agrees, though she finds it odd that he's asking for wheat at this time of year. When Shindo returns to his fields, he plans to use the growth stimulants to make the crops grow quickly. The only reason behind his request is that he was just craving some good tempura, and for that, he needs wheat. So he gets in touch with Himari through the dryads, asking her to clean up the fields, and after that, they'll move on to growing some alhilda mushrooms. Himari has been waiting for this moment, and she told Shindo she would be here soon. Meanwhile, he decides to deal with the withered remains of the crops he already harvested. The dryad mentions they can handle it with their rain, which makes him wonder how rain could possibly clean up the field. The dryad just smiles and tells him to watch. As he observes, the rain falls, but it's no ordinary downpour. The plants begin melting away, dissolving into the soil. He learns that it's called the dryad's restorative rain cloud, which breaks down the plants and enriches the earth. The best part with this rain is that no compost is needed for the next planting cycle. Shindo can't help but praise the dryads for this incredible rain, and they look pleased, happy to receive his compliment. Soon after, Himari arrives, flying over and spotting that Shindo has already finished tidying up the fields. With that done, they can move on to the next task, setting up the greenhouse. He pulls out the item, and with just a moment, a fully covered confined space materializes right in front of them. It's more convenient than he expected. Shindo turns to Himari, asking if they should get started. She's excited. clearly eager to finally find what she's been searching for. He asks if she has any alhilda mushroom spores, and she tells him they're scattered everywhere, like rocks on the ground. He can't see them like she can, though. So, he activates his microscope skill, and suddenly he can see them too. Tiny alhilda mushroom spores everywhere. Now that they've located the spores, it's time to cultivate them. Shindo heads into the greenhouse, but as soon as the environment adjusts for the alhilda spores, everything changes. The air becomes thick with toxic fumes, and the temperature spikes. It feels like he's standing inside a furnace, surrounded by toxic hams under intense pressure. They hadn't expected the environment to be this extreme. Shindo hesitates for a moment, realizing he needs to go inside the greenhouse to use the growth stimulant, but it's clearly too dangerous. Himari reassures him, saying he'll be fine in any environment. He wonders where her confidence in him comes from, but decides to test it. He throws a barrel into the greenhouse, and it's instantly crushed and melted by the high pressure and heat. The sight of the barrel melting confirms his fears. The conditions inside the greenhouse are definitely not survivable for humans. He asks Himari if she has any tips, and she advises him to use his auto-heal skill and hold his breath while he's inside. With no other choice, Shindo prepares himself. He activates his auto-cure skill and, for extra safety, locks his HP to make sure he doesn't completely die in there. Stealing his nerves, Shindo enters the greenhouse while Himari wishes him luck. The moment he steps inside, he's hit by the overwhelming pressure and toxic gas. It's the kind of environment that could destroy a human body instantly. But somehow, his support skills hold up, and he manages to endure the crushing heat and fumes. He can't help but wonder what would have happened if even one of his skills had been weaker. Still, he knows he can't relax. He can only hold his breath for so long. Quickly, he searches for the spores, using his microscope ability to spot them in the toxic air. Once he finds them, he takes out the growth stimulant and applies it to the alhilda spores, accelerating their growth by 3 months. As he's about to leave, he notices other mushroom spores growing nearby. He adds a drop of stimulant to them too before finally rushing out of the toxic environment. Outside, he gasps for air, glad to have made it out in one piece. Himari asks if Shindo is safe, and he assures her that he'll manage somehow. Then, he gets to the real question and asks how long it will take for the alhilda mushrooms to form fruiting bodies. Himari explains that normally, it takes about 1 year and 3 months. Shindo does some quick math and tells her that with the growth stimulant, they'll be ready to harvest in just 16 days. She's surprised seeing that it's incredibly fast, but Shindo reassures her that they'll be able to heal her mother much sooner than they thought. Himari can't help but tear up at the news. Smiling, she tells him she'll prepare the other medicinal ingredients while they wait. Shindo declares with confidence that he'll make sure to create a cure strong enough to finally heal Himari's mother. Meanwhile, as time passes and winter hardens the environment, deep in a cave within the forest, her mother lies in bed, sicker than ever. She's been fighting the illness for so long, but now it's starting to take an even greater toll. All she can do is rest and wait, hoping for a miracle. Now the only thing left is to wait for the alhilda mushrooms to grow. In the meantime, Shindo gets a craving to try out a new recipe and decides to gather some ingredients. Himari offers to help, and they take off, riding the Crimson Dragon. She flies him over to the Viling Sea, and Shindo thanks her, excitement building. He knows the sea is cold enough for what he's looking for, perfect seafood for tempura. As they fly, Shindo looks down and notices the entire sea is covered in ice. Not a drop of seawater can be seen. Without hesitation, he leaps off the dragon, aiming right for the icy surface. With a single blow, he smashes through the ice, shattering it completely. Himari, still in the air, watches in shock. This sea ice, which has never been broken in recorded history, is now shattered like it was nothing. As Himari descends, she's still processing what just happened. Shindo, as calm as ever, asks her why she guided him to a frozen sea in the first place. Himari explains that seafood is abundant here, and now that the ice is broken, it's all within reach. Shindo is busy talking with Himari as she explains the mysteries of the frozen sea. Neither of them notices the large tentacle rising silently from the water behind him. Before Shindo can react, the tentacle wraps around him and pulls him straight into the sea. Panic sets in as he realizes what's happening. He's being dragged deeper into the dark, icy water by an enormous tentacle coiling tightly around his body. The pressure builds as he's pulled further down, and Shindo catches sight of the massive creature responsible. The tentacle is impossibly large, leading to a huge, gaping opening below. But instead of letting fear take over, he regains his composure. With a deep breath, Shindo activates his flight skill, propelling himself upwards. The tentacle still clings to him, but its grip weakens with every passing second. As Shindo bursts above the surface, Himari watches in amazement. The giant squid that had grabbed him rises from the sea, its monstrous body finally fully visible. Shindo, with a grin on his face, remarks that it's quite the catch. Without hesitation, he frees himself from the tentacle's grip and, with a surge of power, yanks the entire squid out of the water. The giant squid thrashes violently, swinging its tentacles at Shindo, but he moves effortlessly, dodging every attack with ease. He knows that if he strikes the base of the squid's head, it will be paralyzed. It's a risky move, but he decides to go for it. He flies high into the air, then dives down at incredible speed, aiming right for the squid. With one powerful swipe, he strikes the creature's head, and just as he hoped, the squid goes limp. Not wasting any time, Shindo opens a huge portal using his storage skill. The portal hovers just above the sea, and the paralyzed squid falls directly into it, disappearing in an instant. Himari watches in disbelief. She tells Shindo that storage skills only work on dead things, but Shindo explains calmly that the squid was so paralyzed it was basically on the verge of death, making it qualify for storage. Himari and the nearby dryads are stunned. They marvel at how Shindo can even modify his storage skill to suit his needs. To them, it seems like he's on a completely different level, but Shindo just shrugs it off, saying there's no competition. Without wasting any time, Shindo activates his flight skill again and dives back into the sea, eager to find more fish. The water is teeming with life, schools of fish surrounding him from all sides. Shindo is captivated by the variety of fish swimming past him, but one fish catches his eye. A large tuna rushes toward him, and Shindo smirks. This time, the prey comes to him. Drawing his sword, Shindo easily pierces through the tuna, capturing it in one clean strike. But he isn't done yet. His eyes land on a group of shrimps nearby, and his thoughts immediately drift to the idea of tempura shrimp. He can't resist. In no time, he's caught enough to satisfy his cravings. When Shindo finally emerges from the sea, Himari can tell by the look on his face that he's had a successful hunt. He asks her to take him to the market, eager to get all the fish processed, ready for the next feast. At the fish market, Shindo feels a wave of disappointment wash over him when the shopkeeper tells him they don't handle the processing, as they only deal with loyal fishing boats. It's not what he wanted to hear, but with no other choice, he decides to try elsewhere. Just as he's about to leave, the store manager stops him and asks to see what he's caught. Shindo hesitates but pulls out the tuna from his bag. The moment the fish is out, the manager's eyes widen in shock. The tuna is pristine, its fattiness and freshness well beyond anything he's seen. He's amazed. The manager, still staring at the fish, admits that they don't usually deal with non-regulars, but the quality Shindo brought in is way beyond their standards. He offers Shindo a deal. If Shindo lets them procure a portion of the fillet, they'll help him process what he needs. Shindo feels a wave of relief and agrees. The manager even mentions that depending on the quantity, they might waive the processing fee altogether. Still marveling at the tuna, the manager casually asks if Shindo caught it in some kind of special fishing ground. Shindo nods, mentioning he caught other fish there as well. He wonders if they'd be willing to process those too. Without thinking much of it, Shindo uses his storage skill. A portal opens right there, and in the next moment, a massive squid is sprawled out on the street in front of the store. The thing is huge, almost covering the whole road, and the manager's scream of shock pierces the air. People around them stop and stare. Shindo, still oblivious to the size of the situation, wonders if processing this giant squid might be a hassle. But the manager is more interested in the portal and Shindo's storage skill. His eyes locked on the markings and color of the squid. After a moment of studying it, he exclaims in disbelief, saying this isn't just any squid, it's a kraken. Shindo listens, confused as always, as the manager rambles about how impossible it is for someone to catch a kraken. Shindo explains that he paralyzed it before catching it, and the manager's face turns pale. He's practically shaking, wondering if Shindo is even human. Still not getting what all the fuss is about, Shindo turns to Himari, who's now in her human form. She steps forward and explains that this isn't just a big squid, it's a legendary monster. To Shindo, it might have just been a large catch, but to everyone else, it's an unimaginable feat. No normal person would ever think of taking down a kraken barehanded. Shindo shrugs, saying it's okay if they can't process it, but the manager cuts him off immediately. He insists it's not a problem. In fact, he's excited. Kraken meat is considered a delicacy, and they'd be more than happy to help him process it. After a while, the manager finishes processing the fish and hands everything back to Shindo, along with a few extras on the house. Shindo thanks him and heads out with Himari. As they walk back, Shindo turns to Himari and asks if she'd help him with something. She agrees, but looks a bit confused. Soon, they're hovering over the sea with Himari in her dragon form. She glances at Shindo and asks what exactly they're doing here. Shindo smiles, using his advanced alchemy skill, And before Himari can react, salt starts pouring from the sky. Himari's eyes widen in shock as she scolds him, asking why he'd waste alchemy just to save on salt costs. Realizing he may have overdone it, Shindo scratches his head awkwardly, agreeing with her. Even the dryads had warned him not to use his skills so lightly. Shindo then remembers something else. He turns to Himari again and asks if she'll help him gather hops. Himari, still recovering from his latest stunt, isn't entirely sure what he's planning, but she agrees. Shindo's got something in mind, and she's curious to see what it is. Himari flies down near Shindo, transforming from her dragon form into a beautiful girl. She excitedly tells him that she's got what he asked for, and opens her palms to reveal some buds. Shindo identifies them as hops, and Himari curiously asks what he plans to do with them. She knows Shindo is probably up to something outrageous again. Shindo, already drooling with excitement, explains that he'll use the hops to make soy sauce, wheat flour, and beer. He's already got yeast from the bread shop, and now most of the ingredients are ready. Himari doesn't really know what these things are, but just looking at Shindo's drooling face makes her certain that he's planning something delicious. She eagerly says she can't wait to taste whatever he's going to make and even starts drooling herself. Shindo, trying to calm her down, reminds her that he hasn't finished the preparations yet, and that there's still one more thing he has to do. He pulls out a dubbing card, and Himari asks what he's going to duplicate. Without saying much, Shindo uses the card on the greenhouse, creating another one in an instant. Himari wonders what he plans to grow in there, while Shindo is already searching for the perfect spot for his next experiment. When he finds it, he takes out a needle and squirts out a fast-growing solution. But Shindo overdoes it, and suddenly a mountain of seeds bursts from the ground, swallowing him whole. As Shindo struggles to get free, still upside down in the mountain of seeds, Himari watches in shock. Shindo finally explains that the seeds are for making a seasoning called soy sauce. Himari asks how these seeds will turn into a seasoning, and Shindo says there are still more steps before that can happen. He suggests they head to town for the next part of his plan, and they set off. In town, they visit a realtor. The receptionist greets them and asks what they're looking for. Shindo explains he's not looking for any items. He's actually looking for a vacant lot. The receptionist agrees to help and hands him a catalog to browse. Himari, sitting beside Shindo, is still confused, wondering why he needs a vacant lot just to make seasoning. Shindo, however, has it all planned out. He's going to build a factory using his master-level architecture skill. After looking through the catalog, Shindo selects a piece of land. The realtor tells him it will cost 3.2 million ethers and adds that he can take out a loan if needed. She asks if he wants to appoint a guarantor or use an item as collateral for the loan. Shindo, realizing he doesn't have the money on hand, agrees to the loan and pulls out a skill card from his inventory. He asks if it would work as collateral. The realtor lady is stunned. It's the legendary Wyvern circulation card, one of only 5 in existence. She starts sweating, unable to believe Shindo is offering such a rare item as collateral for a simple piece of land. Shindo calmly explains that it's the only valuable thing he has. The realtor, still panicking, tries to figure out how she'll even store such a rare card safely, while Himari, used to Shindo's absurd ways, remains completely unfazed. Shindo and Himari finally arrive at the plot of land Shindo recently bought. Himari asks what his plan is, but Shindo doesn't respond. Instead, he extends his arm and activates his master-level architecture skill. The entire area begins to glow as the structure starts taking shape, gradually appearing before them. Shindo is focused, carefully designing every detail of the building in his mind as he constructs it with his skill. He already has a clear plan. The first floor will handle dehydrating and dehusking wheat. The second floor will be dedicated to milling the wheat into flour. The third floor is for soy sauce production, and the fourth floor will be used to make beer. All of this is possible because Shindo had studied food manufacturing back when he was job hunting as a new graduate in his previous life. He recalls the necessary factory equipment and operational processes as if it were second nature. As the building continues to materialize, Himari watches in awe. Though she's grown accustomed to Shindo's extraordinary abilities, the sight still amazes her. The structure looks modern, much more advanced than anything else in this world. She wonders how it will function, but Shindo reassures her with a confident smile, explaining that each floor has been thoroughly planned. Everything is ready now. Despite her amazement, Himari still can't fully grasp how it will all work. Shindo suggests she return in 2 days after they've harvested their wheat, promising that everything will be in motion by then. He also invites her to join him as he wants to show her something else. Himari, both excited and curious, agrees. Later, in the greenhouse, Shindo shares the progress of the alhilda mushrooms with her. He applies the growth stimulant for the 3rd time, and Himari is stunned by how much the mushrooms have grown. Shindo points out that the fruiting bodies are now visible, a sign that they're getting closer to maturity. Himari feels a sense of relief, thinking her mother won't have to wait much longer for the medicine. Shindo heads over to the wheat field to check its condition. He asks the dryads to help make it rain using a stimulant that's already been prepared, and they agree. Soon, rain starts pouring down over the field. Within moments, Shindo notices the wheat looks ripe for harvest. Curious, he decides to appraise it. The wheat turns out to be super low glycemic, with an extremely low glycemic index. This means the carbohydrates in the wheat can be absorbed without insulin, making it perfect for diabetics. The taste is also exceptional, which is an added bonus. As they walk through the field, Himari thanks the dryads, acknowledging their help in making all this happen. Shindo then suggests they head over to the factory. Once they arrive, Shindo shows them the machine he built. The first floor is equipped with machinery for dehydrating and dehusking the wheat, and everything is working as planned. Himari and the dryad are impressed, amazed by the setup. Himari asks if all they have to do is put the wheat into the machine, and Shindo confirms that's all there is to it. Everything else happens automatically. Himari, still trying to grasp what automatic means, watches as Shindo announces that the process is almost complete. He uses his storage skill to check the wheat, and after processing, it weighs 7.3 tons. Shindo is surprised by the large yield from such a small plot of land. Himari wonders if the dryads had a hand in this success. Excited for the next step, they begin placing ingredients into the machines on each floor. Once everything is set, the machines start operating. Himari remains unsure about how these machines work on their own, but Shindo reassures her. She still finds it hard to believe that machines can make food automatically, without anyone doing anything. To explain things better, Shindo walks her through the entire process. The fourth floor is for beer production, complete with fermentation tanks and a filtration system. The third floor is where soy sauce is made, and there's also a section for flour production. The first floor handles wheat dehydration. Himari is shocked by the scale of everything and questions how food production could involve such advanced equipment. Shindo tells her not to overthink the process and to just wait for the results. He assures her that from now on, they'll be producing incredibly delicious food.